Welcome back to another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. Hey folks, it's Falcon. Today we're talking Elden Ring, Nightreign. After Shadow of the Erd Tree, the guys at From swore up and down they had no plans for a sequel or any more DLC, and I believed them because that's usually the way these games go. They get a usually excellent add-on, and that's it. Finito. They move on to something else. So, when they announced Nightreign, nobody saw it coming, and nobody could have anticipated what a weird experimental game it would actually be. I think it's important to emphasize what exactly Nightreign is, because I'm still seeing people being like, should I finish the DLC before jumping into Nightreign? And I don't think they quite understand what's going on here. And I don't blame them, because it did take me a little while to wrap my head around it myself. So what it actually is, it's a 3-player cooperative spin-off where you play as one of 8 predetermined classes. You drop into a map that has a limited amount of time to explore, grab loot, kill enemies, slay bosses, and acquire resources and upgrades in order to get strong enough to take on a powerful end boss that appears on day 3. All the while, you have to deal consistently with a closing circle, kind of like Fortnite or a Battle Royale. The Nightreign does constant damage if you're outside of the circle. Each run is split into 3 parts, or days. You have 2 days to explore the map. The last day is simply the final boss fight. How each day works is that you get about 20 minutes to run around and explore, but when the circle finally closes, you encounter a boss that you have to take down as a team. And then day 2 kicks off, whole thing starts over. Each location resets, new roaming bosses start appearing all over, etc. You can play it solo, but it's pretty obvious the meat and potatoes is the 3-player co-op. It is a multiplayer game, first and foremost. It is not a follow-up to Elden Ring. It is a spin-off, and I think that's going to make it pretty divisive. I know the premise probably sounds appealing to a lot of people. It's the #1 wish-listed thing on Steam right now, but I also know a lot of you are ready to get off this train just from the premise alone. So, in videos where we talk about Nightreign coming up, I've generally been pretty positive about it. It's something that I think looks very cool. It is From we're talking about also. These guys have not missed once in the last decade or so. But unfortunately, as it is now, anyways, I think it's a miss. It's got a lot of really good ideas, and there's some really good highlights. It's not like a disaster or anything, and I'm not saying it's unsalvageable. It is far from that. But it's just got so many little problems, issues, and places where they didn't quite think everything through, and it doesn't just hang together properly. It doesn't mesh completely. It meshes enough. I mean, there's going to be people that love this, but to me, it needs to be worked on more from this point. So the thing with From is that their multiplayer offerings have always been kind of ropey, but that's worked just fine because the online stuff has always been a complement to the single player, not the focus. Well, here it's the focus, and it's still kind of ropey. There's problems. For one thing, the entire game is balanced around having 3 players, so if one player drops out mid-match, you're screwed. It's theoretically possible you'll be able to beat the big boss at the end with just 2, but it's not likely. Sure, the game punishes players for dropping out early, yes, but the result of that means the 2 remaining players are stuck playing a dead game that punishes them for that guy quitting, and then there's 40 minutes of your life down the drain. The devs said they might add in 2-player support after the release, but, I mean, whether that's successful is contingent on if the balance changes if a player drops out. Knowing how From has done things in the past, I'm a little skeptical of them doing that. It seems like the balance is set at game creation, and they don't generally adjust it. Like I said, solo is technically doable, and depending on your class, actually pretty possible, but the bosses are clearly balanced for multiple players. This thing loves throwing tons of crap, like chaotic screen-filling magic attacks that are clearly designed for a group to deal with. When you're with a team, sometimes they're borderline unfair, but when you're by yourself, they're full stop unfair. I don't want to just complain about this game, because there are positives, so I'm going to stop right there and get to those positives. The core part is co-op, and it's fun. The baseline of just playing the game with other people it's plenty a good time. The classes are varied and interesting, and the new character-based skills are really powerful and really satisfying to use, and they recharge pretty quickly, so you can use this stuff a lot. Each Nightfarer brings something useful to the table, too. The Wilder's grappling hook it's beyond satisfying. It's very good. It's super useful for taking out weaker enemies or getting around quickly. It's great. The Guardian's ultimate looks amazing. It's a lifesaver when you need to revive down allies. The Duchess's rewind ability feels like cheating in like a really fun way. It literally just rewinds the last damage an enemy took, basically doubling the damage output if you use it properly. It's so good. And there's more crazy stuff other classes could do out. I don't want to spoil. First, because it'd take too long, and second, because it's really fun to just find. The idea of playing a specific classes other than your own custom character might sound limiting, but to me, the 8 playable characters in Nightreign actually cover a pretty broad range of archetypes, and it works. I never saw anybody play as the Recluse or the Raider, but that's not meant to knock their utility or anything. It's just early days, and I haven't seen anybody really get into that. The boss fights are, of course, the real highlight here, though I think it's fair to say there's a lot of reused stuff from Elden Ring. Like, the majority of the fights are the same old stuff that everybody might be even a little tired of from the base game, but when something new pops up, things get crazy interesting. How game progression works is you pick one of 8 potential Night Lords to go after. Some of these guys are locked at first, so they're not all available at the start. And depending on which one you pick, that affects which bosses you can potentially face at the end of day 1 and 2. They usually cycle between 2 or so different options. You might find something basic from Elden Ring, like a Tibia Mariner, or it might be something interesting, like a returning boss from the back catalog, like the Centipede Demon from Dark Souls. You got Duke's Dear Freya from Dark Souls 2. Even the Nameless King from Dark Souls 3. It's ridiculous, but it's there. And they're not the only returning bosses. What makes these returning bosses so interesting is they took the original fights and adapted them to this multiplayer-focused game. So they got new moves, new abilities, and they generally gave them a glow-up for this entry. Seeing these things return with a new coat of paint is one of the most satisfying things about Nightreign. The Night Lords themselves are another highlight. Just to be clear, they're great. But let's start maybe going in the other direction a little bit. They're also one of the biggest flaws in the game. The fights themselves, epic. They're practically all last bosses in their own right, and every single one is very difficult. It's like getting 8 Radons in one game. The challenge is extreme, but when you actually manage to best one of them, it is satisfying as hell. The problem is, what if you don't manage to beat them? Most of the time, you're not going to beat them. It's just that simple. They're the hardest fights in the game by far. You get one shot at them, and if you lose, that's 40 minutes down the drain. If you thought the boss runs in the old games were bad, they have absolutely nothing on Nightreign. Every time you die, you spend a minimum of 40 minutes just to get one more shot at them. And what happens if you get stuck with a worthless item or one guy drops mid-match or just have bad luck and don't get any useful weapon drops or upgrades? What then? Like, I love Downwell. It's one of the best roguelike type games. I love it. But if you don't get good drops and you get to that last boss and you fail, you get really mad. And that game is relatively easy compared to Nightreign. It's also pretty uncomplex and doesn't rely on you understanding a lot of things. I only bring it up because that's kind of the reason that works. Honestly, you can blaze through Downwell pretty quick because it's a non-complex game where you just go down. Here you're dealing with other people, you're dealing with a gradually dwindling play area, you're dealing with different systems, you're dealing with balance. Things can change fairly drastically between days. I mean, and I'm really only scratching the surface here. It's a much more complex game with a similar potential problem. In a simpler game, it's not so much a problem. In a game that's frankly fairly involved and does take a lot more time to beat. I mean, 40 minutes is not a long time for a game by any means, but it's not a multiplayer match either. But I will say, at least you're always making some kind of progress. When you do lose a game, which is going to happen so much, you still get something for your trouble. At the end of the run, you get relics and a currency called Merc that can be used at the shop and the round table to unlock persistent rewards like emotes. Relics work just like the runes from Bloodborne. They're randomized upgrades that you can equip on your Nightfarers to permanently make them more powerful. If you're lucky, some of these can be extremely effective and add powerful effects that make your character significantly better, but to be fair, a lot of these things are going to be next to worthless. Still, it is nice to have some kind of progression, and I appreciate that they kept it relatively simple. This is not a non-complex game, but compare it to Elden Ring proper, it's a lot simpler. More importantly, there aren't any microtransactions. You can only get Merc by playing the game, and they give you more than enough to unlock the stuff that you want relatively quickly. It's only the alternate costumes that are really expensive, and they're not expensive with money, they're expensive with Merc. So you got to play the game more. There is another element of persistence in the game, the Nightfarer memories, which can be accessed from a journal in the Round Table Hold. I don't really consider this a positive or a negative. They're just kind of there. You can complete little objectives that progresses any of the character's story, which at least unlocks some useful class relics for each guy. but otherwise it's pretty basic. It doesn't stand out. The story elements here feel even more secondary than they do with Elden Ring proper. They barely even matter, and any lore introduced feels kind of tacked on. Like they know that Souls games need lore, so here's lore. Why? It doesn't matter. I really don't care. Circling back around to the Night Lords, though, these guys are undoubtedly the highlights of the game. They're big, they're bombastic, they're suitably impressive, but they're also the biggest ball aches you are ever going to have, and they are pushing the limits of what should be considered an acceptable challenge in one of these games. At least in Elden Ring, every boss was designed to be fought one-on-one, so there's some built-in fairness of some kind, even when they got absurdly difficult. These guys, no. Nothing is holding them back, and because of that, some of these fights are just absolutely brutal, and sometimes just not fun. You have to be prepared for these things or they will wipe the floor with you. Period, exclamation mark, other punctuation. It's just, you're not casually playing Nightreign and winning, ever. There's so little margin for error, and one weak link on a team can kill an entire run. I think this is my biggest problem with the game. It's just a lot of running around and minor exclusions or mistakes doom you. Okay, so let me explain exactly what I mean. If you want to beat the Night Lord, you have to play efficiently. And how do you play efficiently in Nightreign? Well, you follow a very strict formula of beelining to the Marika shrines on the map and max out your charges on your Sacred Flask, and you run straight to all the easiest bosses on the map to get all the powerful drops, then you kill the boss of the castle and do any random events, and that's it. Rinse and repeat. You run past everything, go to whatever bosses are around, and that's how you play the game, and it just feels not quite purposeful. Like, what are we doing here? There's a giant castle to explore, but it's always the same, so everyone just beelines straight through the whole thing, avoiding all the enemies, because there's no reason to be fighting them. There's just not enough time to explore or really learn the map. It's always rush to the next boss, and you cut it down in seconds, you collect your loot, and then you move on. There's not really any sense of wonder. The mystery of the original game is gone, and it's replaced with rote map memorization. It feels kind of like speedrunning rather than actually playing the game, and some people are going to be into that. Like, I want to be clear. This isn't necessarily a negative for everyone, but there's just aspects of it that aren't right. Like, probably for the first few runs, it feels like it's going to be a really cool thing, but then after a few, it kind of, So a large reason for that, too, I might add, is that the map just barely ever changes. Other than the placement of a few key locations, the actual map layout is shockingly static. It's always the same deep river with a castle in the middle. That's always the exact same layout with the lake at the lower part of the map. Sometimes a random event happens, it changes the shape of the map a bit, but it's static to such an extent that it's just too much. And I'll say it's because what this desperately needs, it's more map variety and some randomization. Right now, it's the starting area of Elden Ring stretched out into an entire game. There were so many memorable, visually interesting, and complex locations in the main game, and you see almost none of them here. Just a lot of generic castles and ruins. When something memorable does happen, like the shifting earth events that happen right after being a Night Lord, it at least does something to change the map, but these are static too. They're always the same, and once you learn the game, you're always running them because the best rewards are in these things, so that's how you get the most powerful weapons and power-ups, gives you the best chance of beating the Night Lord. The game's challenge is a double-edged sword, where it makes the experience more interesting. Yes, I mean, there wouldn't be much to do if the Night Lords were easy, but at the same time, the only way to actually win is to play in the most optimized manner possible, and honestly, in some ways, I really like that, but there's something missing from it that makes it kind of boring. I don't really know how to say it either. I like quick experiences. I talked about this in the Precinct BYB. I like dropping in and playing like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, and then that's it. That's something I like. So, in theory, this should be the kind of Elden Ring I can keep playing for a long time. But there's just something just not there. I was getting pretty sick of this map before actually finishing the game, to be honest. And I have to imagine there's a lot of other players that are going to feel the same way. I don't know how, as it is right now, it retains player interest in the long term. On one hand, I do get it. You can't really have these maps be procedurally generated with how they work. You need to have them carefully designed to actually be fun to move through and, be manageable to some extent. But they could have at least given us some different biomes or some radically different looking layouts with some different structures and boss fights to mix things up. I mean, maybe they could have put in another enemy type or something as a treat. I know From are kind of the masters of reusing assets at this point, but seriously, almost everything in this game is reused from Elden Ring. All the weapons, locations, bosses, enemies, it's all plugged directly from the original game with only a few minor modifications. And I don't want to say that's like the biggest detriment in the world, because I think in theory you probably could describe like a good version, like an excellent version of this game as that. It's just not there. And when it's not there, all of the reused stuff feels not great. You've seen it in a similar context. It's used in a similar way. It doesn't feel new. The only thing that really feels new is the Night Lords, and those are the things you see the least because you have to slog through 40 minutes of reruns to get to them. And that's what it feels like, reruns. I'm not saying that's inherently what reused assets and stuff are. It's not. To be frank, with a few minor tweaks, I think this probably could be a pretty different game that does actually fix some of these problems. And sure, it's only $40, but even that feels a little bit high for how much you're actually getting here. And problems that plagued the original Elden Ring, they are still here. The stuttering, if anything, it's a little worse here. I played it on a PS5 Pro, and the frame rate dipping is like borderline absurd at times. There's no reason for Elden Ring proper to run like this on PS5 Pro, let alone a pared down experience. I guess when it's single player also, it's maybe a little easier to overlook the frame rate, but with multiplayer, this slowdown has to be gotten under control. It's unacceptably bad at times. So I guess to wrap up, I went into Nightreign really wanting to like it. I love the idea of a multiplayer co-op focused Souls-like, and I can't say that I dislike it or even that I don't like it, but it just doesn't come together properly. It's both too slow and too fast at the same time. It's too complex for new players. Like, it expects you to be an Elden Ring expert from minute one with a very rudimentary tutorial that only explains like the most basic stuff from the game, and too basic for a multiplayer game you're supposed to play over and over again. It is a fun game for the initial few hours, especially if you got two other friends to play with, because trying to play this thing with randoms can be real. Well, it's a nightmare. It can get stale super quick. I do think the game represents a very good idea, and if you go into it with the right mindset and a solid group of friends, you're gonna have a good time, but you gotta know what it is, and you gotta want that thing, and to be frank, it could be a lot more with a little more. You know what I mean? I might be being a little harsh here, but for me, Nightreign is it's just a bit of a misfire. I'm not saying it can't get better. From very easily could take this into great territory relatively quickly. It doesn't need like a full rework or anything. And it does have its positives. I love the designs of the Night Lords. The returning bosses are a real nostalgia kick. But the interesting concept and the fun character powers, it's all held down by this very limited world and very repetitive gameplay, which it's built into the core concept, so it's going to be like that, but again, with a few modifications. We're talking about a really salvageable game that could be turned into something, honestly, I even think great. It just needs more work. They need to make the experience something that can vary from game to game, run to run, because it doesn't really. I mean, you could just give us a co-op mode in one of these damn games without any time limit BS. That's what people want. But also, if I'm completely frank, I want them to make this into the good version of this, because there's so much good stuff here. There needs to be more of it. It needs to play out differently, run to run. That's it. That's kind of the main problems. And if they're big enough problems that it's a hindrance for a $40 game. It's just a $40 game, but that's enough to hinder it. It's enough to feel like, what if this was $25? You know, $25? I think I'd be a lot more forgiving. That's not even a huge price. That's $15. But with what we're getting here, it's not worth it. Not to me. We'll see what From does with it. I hope that they're willing to stick with it and make it into what it should be, but we'll see. What do you think, though? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter and book me on Cameo, @FalconTheHero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.
Alas, the curtain may be drawing to a close upon this world.